Before USAir Flight 405 ever reached the sky, the sequence that would bring it down may already have been underway. The crew couldn't see it, the passengers had no reason to suspect it, and nothing about the aircraft suggested that the departure ahead would become one of the most closely studied winter accidents in American aviation. On the evening of March 22, 1992, 47 passengers boarded a USAir Fokker F-28 at New York's LaGuardia Airport for the short flight to Cleveland, Ohio. The aircraft had completed its earlier flights without mechanical difficulty, and neither the maintenance records nor the crew's pre-flight preparations indicated anything unusual. The challenge lay elsewhere. Snow continued falling across the airport, temperatures remained below freezing, and departure delays steadily lengthened, as crews worked to keep traffic moving safely through worsening winter conditions. Inside the cockpit, Captain Wallace Madger and First Officer John Ruba prepared for what appeared to be another routine winter departure. Madger brought years of command experience, while Ruba had only recently transitioned to the F-28. As checklists were completed and clearances delayed, the cockpit settled into its familiar rhythm: radio calls, instrument scans, system checks, and occasional glances toward the wings. At the time, the delay seemed like little more than an inconvenience. Only after investigators reconstructed the flight would those quiet minutes on the ground begin to look like the first links in a chain that neither the crew nor the passengers had any reason to recognize. With snow continuing to fall, the crew knew the aircraft could not simply depart without additional preparation. Before pushback, Captain Madger requested a complete de-icing treatment, and ground crews sprayed the F-28 with heated water and glycol, removing the snow and ice that had collected on its critical surfaces. For the moment, the aircraft was ready to fly. The uncertainty was how long those conditions would last. Almost immediately, an unexpected problem interrupted the plan. One of the de-icing trucks suffered a mechanical failure and stopped directly behind the aircraft, making pushback impossible. While technicians worked to move the disabled vehicle, the aircraft remained stationary as fresh snow continued settling onto its wings. Every passing minute quietly reduced the protection the crew believed they still had. The airline's winter guidance anticipated exactly this situation. If too much time elapsed after de-icing, the aircraft's critical surfaces were expected to be reassessed before departure. By the time the obstruction had finally been cleared, that recommended interval had already passed. From the information available in the cockpit, requesting another de-icing treatment appeared to be the safest decision. The crew chose to begin the process again. At the time, there was no obvious reason to question that choice. The investigation would eventually focus on something more subtle, not whether the aircraft had been properly de-iced, but whether time, weather, and operational delays had quietly begun working against the protection that procedure was designed to provide. Following the second de-icing treatment, Flight 405 finally pushed back and began taxiing toward runway 13. Under ordinary conditions, departure would have followed within minutes. That evening, however, LaGuardia was moving at the pace of the weather. Aircraft advanced one at a time through falling snow, and the line ahead seemed to grow longer with every radio transmission. Inside the cockpit, winter operations settled into a familiar routine. Checklists were reviewed, clearances acknowledged, engine instruments monitored, and the wing inspection lights switched on from time to time. Both pilots leaned toward their side windows, examining the visible portions of the wings. Nothing they could see suggested the aircraft had become unsafe. Then another complication emerged. An arriving aircraft reported almost no braking action on a different runway, forcing controllers to consolidate both arrivals and departures onto the same strip of pavement. The departure queue slowed even further. The second de-icing had bought the crew time. The question was whether enough of it remained. Returning for another de-icing treatment risked delaying the flight even longer, potentially exceeding crew duty limits and disrupting operations. Remaining in line meant continuing to wait in active snowfall. Based on everything visible from the cockpit, staying in the queue appeared to be a reasonable decision. Later, investigators would examine whether the most important evidence had been sitting somewhere the crew simply couldn't see. At 10:59 p.m., after more than 30 minutes had passed since the aircraft's second de-icing treatment, Flight 405 finally received takeoff clearance. The throttles advanced, the Fokker accelerated through the falling snow, and every indication available to the crew suggested a normal departure. Engine instruments remained steady, the aircraft tracked the runway centerline, and nothing during the takeoff roll hinted that its performance had already begun to change. As the aircraft reached rotation speed, Captain Madger eased back on the control column. The nose rose smoothly, the main landing gear lifted clear of the runway, and for a brief moment the departure appeared entirely routine. Then the climb failed to develop. Instead of continuing upward, the aircraft struggled to gain altitude. The control column demanded increasing back pressure, and almost immediately the left wing began to sink. The captain responded with opposite control inputs while maintaining maximum available thrust, yet the aircraft reacted sluggishly, producing far less lift than the crew expected. Inside the cockpit, there was no time to diagnose the problem. Every second was consumed simply trying to keep the aircraft flying. Witnesses on the ground watched the jet bank sharply before descending toward Flushing Bay. Only later would investigators determine that the emergency confronting the crew had not begun after liftoff. It had been quietly developing throughout the long wait on the ground. Flight 405 came to rest in the icy waters of Flushing Bay less than a minute after leaving the runway. 27 people lost their lives, while 20 others survived. For investigators, the immediate challenge was not simply documenting the crash, but determining why an aircraft that appeared completely normal during takeoff had become uncontrollable only seconds later. The National Transportation Safety Board began assembling the evidence piece by piece. Flight recorder data, cockpit voice recordings, weather observations, maintenance records, operational procedures, and witness accounts were examined together. Early in the investigation, there was no indication of a major mechanical failure. That forced investigators to look elsewhere. Their attention gradually returned to the aircraft's wings. The evidence suggested that aerodynamic contamination had accumulated despite 2 de-icing treatments. Even a thin, uneven layer of snow or ice can significantly reduce lift, while increasing drag during the critical moments immediately after takeoff. From inside the cockpit, however, the crew's inspections could reveal only the portions of the wings visible through the side windows, leaving other critical areas impossible to evaluate before departure. The investigation ultimately concluded that the accident resulted not from one catastrophic error, but from several individually reasonable decisions made within an imperfect system. Flight 405 remains a lasting reminder that in aviation, the smallest margins are often the ones crews cannot see slowly disappearing until there is no opportunity left to recover.